Have you ever stopped and wondered, why is it called diabetes in the first place? And what does it have to do with ancient Egypt? I've lived with type 1 diabetes since 1997. I never knew the answer. So today we're asking, why is it called diabetes in the first place? Because the story behind the word diabetes is surprisingly weird, a little gross at times, but it's also kind of brilliant. Let's start with ancient Egypt, more than 3,000 years ago, because that seemed logical, right? Well, it actually makes sense, because what they noticed was that some people were always thirsty and always peeing. They called it the disease of too much urine. They didn't know about glucose and insulin, but they did notice something else. They noticed that the urine was sweet and sticky. And here's where it comes a little bit questionable. According to some historical accounts, healers would test it by leaving out a bowl of urine overnight. So if flies were attracted to it, they figured it contained sugar. So yes, the first diabetes test may have involved flies. We've come a long way from that. And then a few centuries later, the Greeks picked up the story. A physician named Atreus of Cappadocia noticed that people with this strange condition seem to be drinking excessive amount of fluid and urinating frequently, like water was just passing straight through them. So he called it diabetes, from the Greek word diabenon. Okay, my Greek isn't amazing, I think. It means pass through. So basically, it's a siphon disease. But the story of the word isn't quite done yet. He identified some of the symptoms, like the thirst and the frequent urination. He even described it, let's say very poetically, as melting down of flesh and limbs into urine. That sounds scary. It sounds a bit more like a zombie diagnosis than anything else. Imagine hearing that today. We got your tests back and yeah, you're melting. I'm glad we gotten a little better at how we understand diabetes, how we describe it, how we talk about it, and also now that we have some treatment options. But yeah, for the next 1,500 years, it was just described as a siphon disease. And then around the 1600s, medicine got a little bit more hands-on. Around 1675, a British doctor named Thomas Willis made a discovery, or rather rediscovery. He noticed that some patients' urine smelled really sweet, but he did not understand why. And in what might be the worst medical experiment ever, doctors confirmed this by tasting the urine. If it was sweet, it was Diabetes Mellitus, from the Latin word mellitus, meaning honey sweet. If it was not sweet, it was Diabetes insipidus. So basically, sweetened and unsweetened diabetes. You have to hand it to them. I mean, medicine was a pretty brave field back then. I'm not a doctor, and I'm really glad I wasn't one back then. So we went from ancient Egypt, disease of too much urine, to Atreus in ancient Greece, naming it diabetes, and then to the 1600 Diabetes Mellitus. But still, we only have names. We did not have an explanation on what and why. It wasn't until the mid-1770s that another Brit, Matthew Dobson, finally publicly confirmed what a lot of others had suspected, that the sweetness of the urine was due to an excess of sugar in both the blood as well as the urine. It was a monumental leap forward. After thousands of years of noting things like excessive thirst, urination, and weight loss, here was the first firm evidence that the sweet pee wasn't just a fluke or a bizarre urine smell, it was sugar. So that's a sweet little span of 4,775 years if you start from ancient Egypt's early records of too much urine to Dobson's chemical confirmation. Yet human discoveries don't always move that fast. In his experiments, Dobson showed that when he dried the pee of someone thought to have diabetes, the residue left could crystallize and taste sweet, and he linked it to sugar. This finding changed the framing of the condition. It's no longer about excess water, but about how the body handles sugar. Now, the sweet urine wasn't just a curiosity, it was a clue to the underlying mechanism. People with diabetes, depending on the type and the progression, either don't have enough insulin or can't use it properly. And then came 1921, the discovery of insulin by Canadian researchers Frederick Banting and Charles Best. That was the moment everything changed. For the first time, diabetes wasn't just a death sentence, it was something people could live with. But the name diabetes stayed the same, even though our understanding of it evolved completely. The word that originally meant to pass through or siphon now refers to a far more complex picture: sugar elevation, insulin deficiency or resistance, organ dysfunction, and chronic complications. The language has evolved in meaning, but the label has remained the same. It's a reminder that in medicine, and I think in a lot of other fields as well, names often outlive their original accuracy. To many, the word diabetic carries a lot of negative. Over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of discussion on, well, how do we talk about diabetes? How do we frame the condition? How do we talk about us who live with it? And I do think that in a lot of cases, naming does matter. Let me give you an example. I was born in Denmark. I was diagnosed in Denmark. And in Danish, we call diabetes both diabetes, but we also call it sukkersyge, which literally means sugar sickness. I'm not a fan of that kind of wording. I mean, it sounds like either we're allergic to sugar or that we got diabetes from eating too many sweets, which is still a misconception that's very much alive, even though we've known that's not true for decades. So I think it helps reinforce that misconception. And it also makes it easier for people to misunderstand or even judge. Another example is juvenile diabetes. For years, that's what type 1 diabetes was called. But the thing is, a lot of people get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as adults. I was 19, and many diagnosed today are above the age of 21. The word juvenile just does not fit. I think it can make a lot of adults with type 1 diabetes feel invisible, and I think it has a huge role to play in why so many adults are being misdiagnosed. And we're seeing some changes now. For one, the JDRF, so originally the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, changed its name to Breakthrough Type 1D in 2024. It's a small change, but I think it says a lot. Diabetes does not care how old you are, what you look like, and I think awareness starts with using the right words. And so we find ourselves living with diabetes, a word that carries thousands of years of medical lore, trial and error, discovery, and innovation. It's a little funny when you think about it. The word diabetes used to just describe peeing too much, and now it's an overall descriptions for some of the most complex metabolic and autoimmune conditions. If we were to name diabetes today, it might be something like a glucose regulation disorder, something like that. It's not as catchy at all, but hopefully it wouldn't make people think of sugar or sugar cubes. We should do a naming exercise. What will you name it? Leave me a comment down below. But still, in the same breath, I don't really mind that the name stuck. It connects 3,000 years of human curiosity, from Egyptian fly tests to modern CGMs. And if anyone asks you, do you have diabetes? Did you get that from eating too much sugar? You can always give them the whole story. Tell them how it started out with Egyptians and the flies, a Greek word for siphon, and a doctor who tasted pee. That should put a nice little bow in that conversation, right? This was fun. I learned a lot while making this video. I hope you enjoyed it as well. So tell me, what other diabetes mystery or diabetes word would you like me to explore next? And if you like it, remember to give it a like below. And you can also share this video. You can share it with anyone you think might benefit from knowing the history of the word diabetes. You can check out other of my videos right here. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I post new content. You'll never miss a thing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.